11. 11. Exaggerated learning ability. Yuki's series of actions left everyone in the kitchen completely stunned. In fact, because he worked so fast, the other chefs responsible for menial tasks soon found themselves with nothing to do. It reached a point where the chefs responsible for cooking were swamped, while the support staff were quite idle. If it weren't a kitchen and working hours, they might have just pulled out a deck of cards. Should I say, as expected, of a sense of touch comparable to the god's tongue? Processing ingredients so precisely is one thing, but this speed is also terrifyingly fast. Quote, that evening, Jin Dujima couldn't help but praise Yuki, who was beside him. He realized he had still underestimated Yuki's special ability. And Yuki himself. After all, any work involving skin contact is easy. But today's gains were also substantial. I learned quite a few small tricks for processing ingredients, Yuki said with a smile. It's like they say, you can learn something from everyone. Even though these chefs handling prep weren't exactly Michelin-starred, everyone had their own strengths. The same applied to ingredient processing. Due to handling these ingredients for extended periods, they had their own techniques, most of which they shared with Yuki, although some held back secrets. In Yuki's eyes, holding back was useless. While he didn't have supervision to instantly copy their techniques, Food Honor had a similar effect, with his own fundamentals as a base. Plus Food Honor, as long as it wasn't too far beyond him, copying these techniques was easy for him. After all, in his perception, their movements were like they were slowed down several times. Kind of like how Spider-Man sees an opponent's punch coming in slow motion. On one hand, slow motion. On the other, direct analysis. Under such conditions, it would be stranger if Yuki couldn't learn. Furthermore, after learning these techniques, Yuki could adjust them according to his own situation, quickly optimizing them into the most suitable techniques for himself. That was Food Honor. Yuki even felt that as long as he accumulated enough, he might even be able to learn the secret techniques from the world of cooking master boy through Food Honor. Of course, this was just a thought. While there was such a possibility, Yuki couldn't do it yet. His accumulation wasn't sufficient. For the next day or two, Jin Dujima didn't assign Yuki any other work. After all, Soe Nakiri and his group were arriving soon. So it was fine for Yuki to continue learning this way. Yuki was happy to do so. Although Food Honor was very powerful and allowed him to learn these techniques quickly, it still took time to perfectly convert them into his own. Food Honor only provided a shortcut. It didn't just let Yuki instantly reach the pinnacle. Moreover, relying on such practical experience could also continuously improve Yuki's understanding of Food Honor. The improvement of Food Honor was undoubtedly fastest through such practical application. And because of his series of impressive feats, Yuki had earned the respect of everyone in the kitchen, even admiration from quite a few. Yuki, let me introduce you. This is Soe Nakiri, the head of Nakiri International. Beside him is his daughter, Alice Nakiri, and Alice's attendant, Ryo Kurokiba. They will also be your classmate later on. After Soe Nakiri and his group arrived, Jin Dujima introduced the people there to Yuki, and also introduced Yuki to Soe Nakiri and his party. In fact, both sides knew a fair bit about each other. Yuki had read the manga, so he naturally knew who these people were. Soe Nakiri and the others had also read Yuki's file, so they were naturally very clear as well. However, the necessary introductions were unavoidable. Yuki greeted them politely, and then everyone got down to business. Mr. Nakiri came this time because of your special ability. Although we tested it before, it was only a simple test, so this kind of work still needs to be handed over to professionals. After the test, Mr. Nakiri will also formulate some plans based on your situation to help you develop your special ability, Jin Dujima said. Although he and Soe Nakiri knew each other, they weren't very familiar. After all, Soe Nakiri had always been managing Nakiri International abroad. Comparatively, Jin Dujima was more familiar with Soe Nakiri's wife, Leonora Nakiri. Of course, this wasn't to say Jin Dujima was interested in another man's wife. Although Leonora Nakiri was a big shot at Nakiri International, she spent more time in Japan. So, Jin Dujima had interacted with her quite a few times and was thus relatively familiar. That's right, just as head chef Dujima said. Although we can't claim to be overly professional, we should still be able to provide some help, Soe Nakiri said. As he spoke, the group walked towards the newly prepared testing site. Hello, I'm Alice Nakiri. Mr. Dujima introduced me just now. It's nice to meet you. Quote, on the way, Alice Nakiri proactively greeted Yuki. I'm Yuki. Yuki looked at Alice Nakiri. It had to be said. Alice Nakiri's looks were undeniably striking. That combination of silvery white hair and ruby red eyes had a serious impact. No doubt about it. Although Alice Nakiri's hair color was strictly speaking a bit light pink, it was mostly white. After a simple exchange, Alice Nakiri became quite talkative. It had to be said. Alice's personality was indeed quite cheerful and chatty. Yuki wasn't very talkative around strangers. He only spoke more when with familiar people. But now, he was also drawn in by Alice Nakiri. Soe Nakiri, at the side, secretly nodded upon seeing this. There should be no problem with his daughter getting closer to him. As for Ryo Kurokiba, who was also at the side, although he was also staring at Yuki, it wasn't the look of someone sizing up a love rival, but pure fighting spirit. He wanted to compete with Yuki. Soon, the group arrived at the new testing site. This time, the tests were more comprehensive. Besides testing his special ability, they would also test the specifics of Yuki's culinary skills. Knowing that Yuki's Inferno ability was immensely destructive, this test was simply conducted outdoors. The special ability test was similar to before. Yuki demonstrated his super sense of touch and terrifying Inferno in front of everyone. The sense of touch aspect was manageable, but when the Inferno ability was displayed, everyone was terrified, even Jin Dujima, who had witnessed it before. Even though it's not the first time I've seen it, this ability still scares the hell out of me, Jin Dujima couldn't help but say, looking at the rising flames and Yuki, who was enveloped in high-temperature steam. It truly is an extraordinary ability. Soe Nakiri nodded in solemn agreement. Less than greater than 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 less than greater than. Tilde hash. Keep the chapters coming. Support with Power Stones. Tilde hash. Every 100 Power Stones equals 1 bonus chapter. Tilde hash. Add to library. 12. 12. The sharpness of the 7-star knives. Such an outrageous special ability. Can humans really control flames like that? And that heat. Is he really okay? Quote. Alice Nakiri, forced back some distance by the heat wave, couldn't help but exclaim as she felt the continuously surging waves of heat. Although she knew about Yuki's special ability beforehand, seeing it with her own eyes was completely different from watching video footage. What a freaking monster. Quote. At this moment, although Ryo Kurokiba was also very shocked, he looked more like he had spotted prey. He had even put on his signature bandana. His expression had changed from his initial poker face to one of fervent excitement. Yuki himself mentioned this before. The high-temperature steam released from his body won't harm him. And the same goes for the surrounding flames. However, for outsiders, it's extremely fatal, Jin Dojima said. Neither the high-temperature steam nor the flames would harm Yuki. But for others, getting too close would result in death or severe injury. Alright, that's it for the special ability test. This ability is called Inferno. Right? I don't have many suggestions regarding the high-temperature steam for now. So the subsequent ability development will primarily focus on the sense of touch. Watching Yuki retract the high-temperature steam and extinguish the flames, Soe Nakiri spoke. He planned to focus on developing the sense of touch next, as that was their area of expertise. Then, let's start testing your culinary skills. Awakening such a special ability should be a great help to your cooking. Right? Soe Nakiri said. According to the data, Yuki was an intermediate chef and still quite far from senior chef. But with the enhancement of this special ability, his culinary skills couldn't have remained stagnant. Finally reaching a domain they understood, Alice Nakiri and Ryo Kurokiba on the side perked up, listening with utmost attention. They were also very curious about Yuki's culinary skills. Just make a dish directly. We'll act as judges, Jin Dojima said. Although there were 4 of them, and judges are usually an odd number, this wasn't a competition or an exam, so there was no need to worry about such details. Yuki naturally had no problem with this. Cooking was his forte. However, what Yuki brought out next made everyone blink. He was lugging a very large case. Is this case for knives? Isn't it a bit too big? Alice Nakiri couldn't help but ask. Many chefs had their own exclusive knives, including herself and Ryo Kurokiba. Although the things she usually brought to competitions were much more exaggerated than this. Even describable as carrying a wall around with her. For simply holding knives, she wouldn't need such a large case. Yuki's file also indicated that he specialized in Asian cuisine, a bona fide traditional chef, and hadn't dabbled in fields like molecular gastronomy. However, when the case was opened, they finally understood why Yuki used such a large case for his knives. Because Yuki didn't take out one knife, but a full 7 of them. And one of them was astonishingly large, with an estimated length of about 1.5 meters. It was hard to imagine it was actually a kitchen knife. The shapes look very strange. But on second thought, if you use different knives to process different ingredients, the effect might be very good. Quote, although Jin Dojima was also surprised by the number and size of the knives. As a chef, and a first-class chef second only to special class, he realized that while some of these knives had peculiar shapes, they would be very effective for processing ingredients. The unique designs corresponded to different types of ingredients. After simulating it himself, he found that this set of knives was incredibly comprehensive. They are indeed very impressive knives. But correspondingly, the difficulty of using this set of knives is also not low. Soe Nakiri naturally also saw the uniqueness of the 7-star knives. But correspondingly, such formidable knives weren't something just anyone could use. The 7 knives corresponded to ingredients of different types, shapes, and sizes. Deciding which knife to use for cooking was a major issue. To make a dish using such knives, one needed to use different knives to process different ingredients. Switching between knives was also a problem. Soe Nakiri felt that if he were to use this set of knives, it would be very strenuous, unless he was given a lot of time to adapt. Are these knives really that good? Quote, Hearing Jin Dujima and Soe Nakiri praise this set of knives, Alice Nakiri asked with some doubt. Compared to these two, both she and Ryo Kurokiba were too inexperienced. After all, both of them were just intermediate chefs. And the gap between them and Soe Nakiri and Jin Dujima was more than just a little bit. It's not just about processing various ingredients. The sharpness of these knives is also astonishing. Yuki barely used any force just now. Yet these knives plunged directly into the cutting board. And he's using a solid wood cutting board, Jin Dujima added. Only then did everyone notice the sharpness of the 7-star knives. Just as Jin Dujima said, Yuki hadn't used much force at all. Yet these knives were deeply embedded in the solid wood cutting board. They were also chefs. Comparing them to their own knives, they found that the sharpness of these knives was exaggerated to the extreme. Compared to these knives, their own blades might as well be called butter knives. Yuki's subsequent actions also confirmed this. The main ingredient Yuki used was a chicken. And it was freshly killed. The 7-star knife glided through the chicken's body as smoothly as cutting tofu. The blade was so sharp that the chicken barely felt any pain at first and hardly struggled. After removing the feathers, Yuki directly gutted the chicken. Similarly, the 7-star knife moved as if there were no resistance. Such sharpness was simply incomparable to the knives of the Food Wars world. Even if the technology in this world was much more advanced than in the world of Cooking Master Boy. But the world of Cooking Master Boy in its later stages was no longer simply ancient times. It was touching the edges of fantasy. Famous knives born in such a world would naturally not be weak. Especially since the 7-star knives were second only to the legendary cooking utensils. If Rache hadn't died early, given a few more decades, he might have truly upgraded the 7-star knives to the level of legendary cooking utensils. After removing the internal organs, Yuki began to make certain cuts on the chicken. He didn't dismantle the chicken but preserved its complete form while making internal cuts. The main reason for doing this was to allow the seasonings to perfectly permeate the chicken meat. Less than greater than 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 less than greater than. #. Keep the chapters coming. Support with Power Stones. #. Every 100 Power Stones equals 1 bonus chapter. #. Add to library. 13. The texture created by Ultimate Fire Control. The different blades danced in Yuki's hands like a whirlwind of knives. Even just watching was dazzling. As the saying goes, laymen watch the excitement, experts see the skill. As chefs, and pretty damn good ones at that, everyone present could see just how difficult it was for Yuki to wield those knives with such finesse. His movements are absolutely perfect. Without the slightest hesitation. It's incredible that he can wield such a complex set of knives with such mastery. Soe Nakiri repeatedly exclaimed in amazement as he watched the cutting, which seemed almost like a work of art. There's no comparison at all. Just by watching, I know I can't do it. Quote, Alice Nakiri, putting herself in Yuki's shoes, had to admit she couldn't match him. Although she was a very competitive person, the gap between her and the current Yuki was too large. So large that she felt completely deflated. Don't compare yourself to him, Alice. His touch-based talent is an ability on par with Arena's God Tongue. The enhancement to his touch allows him to cut with precision. And he also has an absolute advantage in controlling his strength, Soe Nakiri said. Shaking his head, he didn't want his daughter to compare herself to Yuki. After all, that level of tactile sense was too overpowered. It was like others comparing their sense of taste to Arena Nakiri's. Weren't they just asking for a beatdown? Don't worry, father, I'm well aware of that. Alice Nakiri indicated that she knew her own limits. She had only subconsciously put herself in his place just now. She wasn't really planning to compete with Yuki. Amidst everyone's amazement, Yuki finished cutting, then took some side vegetables and seasonings. It's a pity the system awakened recently. Otherwise, I could have definitely developed better seasonings. Single quote. After finishing the marination, Yuki still felt a bit regretful. He could sense that the sauce he used couldn't bring out the dish's flavor to its optimal state. But there was nothing he could do. It had only been a few days since the system awakened. And he was also studying at the Totsuki resort. So he simply couldn't divert his attention to this aspect. However, the main event was next. Although there were some regrets regarding the seasonings. For Yuki, he was now moving on to the next step of cooking. His area of greatest expertise. Fire control. This time, however, Yuki didn't release high-temperature steam but directly lit the stove. What he needed next wasn't high-temperature steam, but flames. In the setting of cooking Master Boy, lighting a fire wasn't as convenient as it is now. So Olkan's Inferno releasing high-temperature steam to ignite combustibles and create fire was very convenient. But in this era, Yuki had no need to take such a roundabout approach. He could just light the fire and then control the flames. The dish Yuki was going to make was very simple. Roast chicken. Similar in method to Olkan's hero roasted bluefish. However, Alkan used a secret technique called the hero fire wheel. Yuki couldn't use this move right now. Although with the enhancements of food honor and his evolving touch, he could indeed achieve it. He didn't have the appropriate equipment. Also, his Inferno ability surpassed Olkan's. Alkan used that move to prevent the ingredients from being directly scorched by the flames, using rotation to evenly cover the fish with heat. But Yuki didn't need to go through such trouble. With his abilities, he could easily control the flames to envelop the chicken's body without charring it. This was the convenience brought by the difference in abilities. Of course, in terms of visual impact, Yuki's method was certainly weaker than Olkan's. As the stove successfully ignited, Yuki controlled the flames before him to directly envelop the chicken on the grill, turning it into a ball of fire. Although this generated astonishing heat, if a normal person were to operate like this, by the time the chicken was cooked, the person would also be nearly cooked. Yuki was not afraid of high temperatures. Such flames couldn't harm him in the slightest. Although he wasn't directly touching the roast chicken, through the grill in his hands, Yuki could still sense the chicken's condition. He constantly adjusted the position and temperature of the flames, so much so that in everyone's eyes, the flames on the surface of the fireball enveloping the chicken were constantly fluctuating. At this moment, the flames seemed like a cage, completely trapping the aroma of the roast chicken within, preventing any of it from escaping. Using this ability to roast meat is really convenient. There's no need to flip the ingredients at all. Watching Yuki stand motionless, those who knew the effects of the Inferno ability naturally understood he wasn't just spacing out. Nevertheless, they were deeply impressed. This ability was genuinely useful. For a chef, the appeal of such an ability was undoubtedly immense. Unfortunately, it was a special ability, essentially a talent, so they could only look on with envy, unable to possess it themselves. Before long, the fireball in front of Yuki suddenly burst open. The scattered flames were like the instant a firework exploded, dazzling in the blink of an eye. disappearing from everyone's sight. At the same time, a rich aroma swept over them. The cage of flames had been like a scent bomb. Now that the bomb had exploded, the aroma naturally spread quickly. The impact of the instantly released aroma makes this dish even more perfect. Although this was just a very ordinary roast chicken, seemingly nothing special, the person who made it was completely different. Smelling the rich aroma in the air, everyone eagerly anticipated the taste of this dish. Seeing their expressions, Yuki didn't waste words but directly took out his 7-star knives and quickly sliced through the roast chicken's body. Due to his extreme speed, everyone only saw flashes of light from the knives. Only after Yuki sheathed his 7-star knives did barely visible slits appear on the chicken. "It's done. Please enjoy," Yuki said. Only when everyone's chopsticks touched the roast chicken did it fall apart. It had to be said. The sharpness of the 7-star knives was truly terrifying. Golden, crispy skin, excellent texture, paired with the tender, juicy meat inside. It perfectly avoids the common problem of roasted chicken being too dry. The fire control is absolutely flawless. In terms of flavor, the use of sauce in side dishes is slightly inferior, but it's completely negligible in the face of this ultimate texture. Soe Nakiri couldn't help but praise. Indeed, the most crucial point of this roast chicken is its texture. If we're purely talking about texture, none of the roast chickens I've eaten in the past can compare to this. Even if other aspects are somewhat lacking, its strengths far outweigh its weaknesses. The standard of this dish should be able to reach third rank level. Yuki, your other aspects have already reached senior chef level, haven't they? Jin Dujima also gave his evaluation. Less than greater than 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 tilde hash. Keep the chapters coming. Support with power stones. Tilde hash. Every 100 power stones equals 1 bonus chapter. Tilde hash. Add to library. 14. Flawless cooking. Yuki was now a senior chef. That was the system's official designation. The system's criteria for ranking were incredibly strict, destined to make Yuki a chef with no weaknesses. But in the outside world, it was different. Chef levels were judged by people. Although these people would try their best to ensure fairness and unified standards, people always have biases. No matter how much they try to control it, biases still exist. Yuki's dish was judged as third class mainly because other aspects held it back. Otherwise, with Yuki's fire control, never mind third class, even a special class chef would have to bow down. Hearing the evaluations from Jin Dujima and the others, Yuki was already very satisfied. After all, making a dish that surpassed one's own level was an extremely difficult feat. In the world of food wars, chefs generally had their own signature dishes. These were the dishes they were best at, capable of ensuring minimal errors or even allowing for exceptional performance. After all, people aren't machines. Even machines make mistakes, let alone humans. A third-class chef, performing poorly, might only produce a senior-level dish. This wasn't uncommon. The dish Yuki made now wasn't a signature dish. Yet it was far more terrifying than those chefs' signature dishes. Most importantly, Yuki's evolving touch made it almost impossible for him to make mistakes. Even Arina Nakiri would have off days. After all, even if she remembered the tastes, the actual execution wasn't so easy. Conversely, Yuki's evolving touch could ensure almost no operational errors. Plus, Yuki also had food honor. It could be said that for Yuki, no matter how many dishes he made, He could achieve 0 mistakes. That's right. With the help of my special ability, my cooking skills have improved very quickly. Although other aspects can't compare to my fire control, they have also reached the senior level. Yuki nodded. Since the system recognized him as a senior chef, it meant he was absolutely the most standard senior chef, with no possibility of any issues. As expected, this special ability has helped you immensely. Even though you've only just awakened it, it already has such an effect. Although Jin Dojima was mentally prepared, he still found it incredible. The improvement brought by Yuki's special ability was far more terrifying than he had imagined. Although he had previously thought Yuki had reached the senior level, he hadn't expected Yuki to be this outrageous. This wasn't just a senior chef. Among many senior chefs, Yuki was in the top tier. In fact, if Yuki participated in a competition that primarily tested a chef's fire control skills, even third-class chefs might not be his match. Senior chef. I remember at Totsuki, generally only the Elite 10 can reach this level. Right? Alice Nakiri couldn't help but say. Although she had always been at Nakiri International and hadn't studied at Totsuki, she was still very familiar with this family enterprise. She naturally knew what level the Totsuki Elite 10 were at. So Yuki being at the senior chef level now also surprised her a bit. After all, both she and Ryo Kurokiba were still intermediate chefs. Correct. The Elite 10 are basically at the senior chef level. Of course, there are exceptions, like the Golden Age back then. Many of the Elite 10 members at that time reached the third-class level before graduation, Soe. Nakiri nodded. While exceptions existed, they were very few. The standards of the Golden Age couldn't be used as a reference. Then isn't student Yuki already qualified to become one of the Elite 10? Alice Nakiri couldn't help but exclaim. You can't quite put it that way. In a pure culinary skill comparison, I don't think any of the current Elite 10 can compare to Yuki. But the Elite 10 themselves possess special privileges. Getting their seats isn't easy. Jin Dojima shook his head. The current Elite 10 were completely different from the Elite 10 of their Golden Age. The Golden Age Elite 10 knew their own culinary skills and were happy to let others challenge them, to hone their own skills. So, they didn't set any challenge thresholds. Even though the Elite 10 had high authority, they didn't care about such things. But now, the position of Elite 10 was highly valued. After all, once one became an Elite 10 member, besides having many privileges within the school, one could also use the Elite 10's privileges to do things outside the school. Megumi Tadokara in the original story was an example. The reason her special ability awakened so quickly was because she used the Elite 10's authority to travel all over the world, instantly expanding her learning scope globally. The power of the Elite 10 was immense, but becoming one was also very difficult. Normally now, one would only have a chance to become an Elite 10 member after the third year high school. Students graduated. Otherwise, even if your culinary skills were stronger, if they didn't compete with you, you still couldn't obtain an Elite 10 seat. So, Yuki's current culinary skills had already leaped directly above all the Elite 10 members. But becoming one wasn't easy, unless some fool was willing to directly give up their Elite 10 position. Forget about the Elite 10. Although there are some privileges, there are too many troublesome matters. I don't have the mind to waste time on these things. Quote. Yuki himself also shook his head. Honestly, he really didn't care for the status of an Elite 10 member. The only thing that could tempt him was the privilege of not needing to attend classes. As for other privileges, he didn't need them. And becoming an Elite 10 member also meant becoming part of Totsuki's management. Yuki wasn't good at that. Nor was he interested. Especially now that the system had awakened. All he wanted to do was continuously improve his culinary skills. That was it. Your personality is quite similar to an old friend of mine. That guy also has zero interest in power at all. Just runs around the world all day long, Jin Dojima said with a smile. He saw a shadow of his old friend in Yuki. After hearing Jin Dojima's words, Yuki naturally knew who he was talking about. Dojima was referring to Joichiro Yukihira. That guy indeed roamed all over the world and had the title of Wandering Chef. But it was precisely because he didn't care about these things and constantly learned various techniques worldwide that Joichiro Yukihira had now become a special class chef, standing at the pinnacle of the culinary world. As for Jin Dojima, although he wasn't as good as Joichiro Yukihira from the start, he could still win against Joichiro in competitions during their student days. Although he lost more often, he had at least won. And it wasn't because Joichiro was holding back. But now, a huge gap already existed between the two of them. Less than greater than 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 less than greater than. #. Keep the chapters coming. Support with Power Stones. #. Every 100 Power Stones equals 1 bonus chapter. #. Add to library. 15. Developing the Evolving Touch. I've made a change to the bonus chapter schedule. Instead of every 300 Power Stones, you'll now receive a bonus chapter every 100 Power Stones. Thanks for the support. Less than greater than 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 less than greater than. No ambition. Quote. Hearing this, Soe Nakiri frowned. A lack of ambition could be both a good and a bad thing. The good part was not having to worry about being backstabbed or usurped after the other party grew stronger. The bad part was that it made recruitment more troublesome. Such a person was destined not to be brought under one's wing like Jin Dojima but could only maintain a cooperative relationship, much like with Joichiro Yukihira. Of course, Soe Nakiri didn't find it exceedingly difficult. After all, while Yuki's personality might prevent complete recruitment, establishing a good relationship was certainly feasible. Let's conclude today's tests here. Regarding your chef rank, I'll contact the WGO later to help you get it certified directly, Soe Nakiri said. I don't need to take an exam? Quote. Hearing this, Yuki was taken aback. Chef rank certification required an examination at a WGO branch. Only after passing could one obtain the certificate. The certificate issued by the WGO was highly valued and internationally recognized in the culinary world. This wasn't comparable to the reputation of a Totsuki graduate. The prestige of a Totsuki graduate was mostly limited to Japan. But in the international culinary scene, a WGO certificate was necessary. Yuki truly hadn't expected Soe Nakiri to bypass the examination process with just a word. We do have some connections at the WGO. Actually, it's not just us. Many organizations' chefs don't need to go to a WGO branch for their certification exams, Allison. The others have never been. Of course, this doesn't apply to all chef ranks. First class and special class chefs must be certified at the WGO headquarters, Soe Nakiri explained. In this regard, they did have some privileges. Not only because of the Nakiri family's influence but also because the WGO's sole special class officer was a Nakiri. The WGO wasn't worried about these organizations acting recklessly. After all, the WGO's status was well established. No power would try to push themselves into opposition with the WGO by fabricating a bunch of easily exposed lies. Well, that's certainly convenient. Quote, Yuki nodded, though internally he couldn't help but think that privileges were indeed quite useful. While he didn't particularly care for them, sometimes privileges could indeed save a lot of time. Afterward, Soe Nakiri explained the upcoming development plan for Yuki's evolving touch. Simply put, it was similar to how Arina Nakiri had developed her sense of taste. This was also why Yuki had sought out Jin Dojima, to use Totsuki's resources to help him collect enough ingredients and various seasonings for his evolving touch to memorize. Only in this way could the evolving touch be utilized to its fullest potential. Both Yuki's evolving touch and Arina Nakiri's God tongue required substantial resources to support. Otherwise, developing these abilities would be extremely difficult. Without sufficient influence and financial backing, it would be impossible to gather so many ingredients. The Nakiri family was very proficient in this area. They frequently had members awaken the God tongue. And although each generation with the God tongue had a tough time, often ending tragically, the Nakiri family certainly knew how to nurture a God tongue. Yuki's evolving touch was similar to the God tongue in some ways. So they could draw upon past experience in developing it. Then what do I need to give in return? Yuki asked. Soe Nakiri had already laid out the benefits. He naturally couldn't just receive them for free. Although Yuki was well aware that the subsequent price would likely be related to the God's tongue, he still had to ask clearly. You don't need to give anything. A favor, a friendship, that's enough. However, Soe Nakiri's words surprised him somewhat. Although debts of gratitude were the hardest to repay, he had a good idea what this particular debt would entail. It was definitely about the God's tongue. As for that, friendship, it felt a bit vague. It could be said that the Nakiri family was essentially gifting these benefits to Yuki this time. For Yuki, once he matured, solving the God's tongue problem would be very easy. So this favor would be straightforward to repay. Let me be frank with you, Yuki, your future is destined to be bright. As long as there are no issues with your special ability, you are fated to stand at the pinnacle of the culinary world. At that time, even if you don't care about so-called power and influence, these things will inevitably gravitate towards you. My old friend, though he never deliberately pursued anything, he has many friends all over the world. If he wanted, power and money would come knocking on his door. Right now, Totsuki could indeed offer some bargaining chips while you haven't fully matured. But that wouldn't be a wise approach, Jin Dojima also spoke up. The meaning was clear. The Nakiri family wasn't that short-sighted. Investing in Yuki now could yield some immediate benefits. But compared to the future, choosing the present would undoubtedly be the most foolish move. I understand. Quote, after hearing Jin Dojima's words, Yuki nodded. Thinking about it, it made sense. With the talent he currently displayed, he was, in the culinary world, a complete unicorn. As long as the Nakiri family members weren't short-sighted, they would know how to build a good relationship with Yuki. It had to be said. Although Yuki knew this approach was about currying favor for future gains, the other party had indeed successfully earned his goodwill. Sometimes, human interaction truly didn't need to be full of schemes. Stating things directly, I know what you need, and I'll tell you what I need. An exchange of benefits while establishing friendship. This was the best choice. At this moment, Yuki, Soe Nakiri, and Jin Dojima all wore smiles. Undoubtedly, this outcome was highly satisfactory to all three. Mr. Dojima, Ryo-kun and I will also stay at the resort for this period. At this moment, Alice Nakiri spoke up. She also intended to build a good relationship with Yuki here. Soe Nakiri didn't even need to emphasize it. She herself was interested in Yuki. And she also knew the benefits of having a good relationship with him. So, she didn't plan to return to the Nakiri estate or Totsuki Academy but intended to stay at a resort until school started. In that case, Alice and the others will be in your care. Soe Nakiri looked at Jin Dojima. He couldn't stay here indefinitely on his trip back. He would return to Nakiri International after a few days at most since his daughter had made such a request. He could only entrust them to Jin Dojima. No problem. I'll take good care of them. Jin Dojima nodded. He could also see Soe Nakiri's intentions and didn't plan to interfere too much in this matter. Less than greater than 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 tilde hash. Keep the chapters coming. Support with power stones. Tilde hash. Every 100 power stones equals 1 bonus chapter. Tilde hash. Add to library.